Today we're talking about getting over defensiveness, misunderstandings, and emotional overwhelm during conflicts in healthy communication strategies. Stick with me. I'm Duke Delayed here for the Intimacy Liberation Army, and this month, January 2025, we've been covering a bunch of stuff about self-awareness, knowing yourself, understanding your triggers, and dealing with your own inner communication strategies so that you can better communicate with others and have healthy relationships. Today we're talking about overcoming common communication challenges with self-awareness, namely getting defensive, having misunderstandings, and blowing things out of proportion, and then emotional overwhelm. You feel like you need to get shut down because of so much going on in the communication. First thing, have you ever been in a conversation with your partner or somebody you were trying to maintain decent rapport with, and then they said something that just rubbed you the wrong way, and then you turned around, got super defensive, you felt attacked, and then you had to respond negative, like responding in a way that attacked them back or shut them down so they don't keep talking, and in that way, it's very difficult to resolve things, come to co-create a solution together, because at the end of the day, you're attempting to end the conversation for whatever reason, whether you're feeling overwhelmed or feeling attacked, feeling betrayed, feeling taken advantage of, etc. So, in order to get over the defensiveness thing, tip number one for overcoming common communication challenges with your self-awareness is to reflect on. Let's start over. Reflect on why you felt attacked. Reflect on why you felt defensive. Reflect on the feelings that came up that made you go into your trigger responses. If you haven't watched the Recognizing Your Triggers and Dealing with Your Triggers videos, click here and here, because I go super deep into figuring out your emotional triggers from childhood and dealing with the aftermath, giving yourself a little gap so that you can understand what is taking place from your memories, from your trauma system, and see if it's still serving you, right? So reflect on why you feel defensive and get really curious about why and what the intention of the other person is. So very often in a conversation, somebody will say something, and they're just trying to voice whatever's in their head or deal with whatever stress they're dealing with, and they'll say something that triggers you, and you flip the fuck out because it looks a lot like the pain and the trauma and shit they had from your past, and that wasn't their intent at all. They were just communicating how they communicate, and just because it's not the best way to communicate with you doesn't mean it's necessarily wrong. It's just wrong in that moment because you took it the wrong way. I mean, it could be wrong, and it could always be improved, but you might have just blown it out of proportion, and it has nothing to do with the current situation. So you want to reflect on why you felt the way you felt. Sometimes I would respond in a way that was like, "Oh yeah, don't talk to me like that. I don't do guilt trips, whatever." And they weren't trying to guilt me at all. They were just being a little bit critical, and I didn't see that. I saw the whole big picture coming in from childhood and weird religious upbringing and all that stuff flow through my mind when they were just they didn't understand something and they wanted to figure it out, right? So if you reflect on why you were triggered and you don't go like assume their intention is negative right out the gate, then you can kind of reflect on what their actual intention was and whether or not it was the best way to bring their intention forward. You can appreciate the fact that they probably didn't mean to piss you off in the way that they pissed you off, because they had no knowledge of the past situations that caused you to react so strongly. So to overcome defensiveness is to figure out actually what you're defending against. If you're feeling attacked, what are you feeling? What's the actual result of the attack, right? I give this example all the time. I forgot who I heard it from. I think it might have been. It might have been Sasha. It's this guy in the community. He used to be called Sasha Day Game, is what he used to call himself. He was from England, I think, or something. Anyway, I met up with him at London in one of our workshops, and he did this fantastic speech. He was always such a great communicator. Um, but he used to say, if a 8-year-old kid walked up to you and they said, "Oh, you have 3 nipples, and the third one is green, and it's or purple, and it's really embarrassing that you have the third purple nipple, and I'm just going to laugh at you and make fun of you all day because of it, because nobody should have a purple nipple, right?" Because there's no truth in that statement. You know that you don't have a third purple nipple, and you know that he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. You're probably not going to get offended and have to defend yourself against this 8-year-old kid's accusation that you have a third purple nipple. And it's only when we kind of self-identify with whatever the other person's saying and project our issues into it that we get super offended. Like, I used to think that if a woman disrespected me, which was not specific enough in the first place, but if she disrespected me, then I could count on getting disrespected all in the same way in the future. And so I could never stand for any sort of disrespect from a woman, because then she'll just run all over you, right? And this is this belief system I had. But, like, I didn't properly define what disrespect meant and what disrespect actually meant into the future, right? If some woman gives me a disapproving look, for instance, is that disrespect, or is that disapproval? Me feeling disapproved of, what does that mean, right? If I project that into the future, what does it matter that this woman didn't like what I had to say, or didn't think that what I did was appropriate, right? What does it matter in the future, really? Is it going to get me banned from a place or kicked out, or is it going to get me inability to make money tomorrow? Is it going to take away my livelihood? Is it going? Well, I mean, what's the actual problem? And very often, people's opinions, people's judgment, people's disapproval, people's betrayal, most of the stuff actually doesn't mean much in the future. If you have a partner for a long time, and you're trying to project a future together, and then betrayal happens, then it's very difficult, because all that expectation and loss is there. But even then, the pain is from loss. It's from this expectation that you had that will no longer be met, and it's way more specific than, "Oh, I got disrespected," or "I was ignored," or I felt abandoned." Like, those are very broad categories. If you can get it down to the thing where you're like, okay, I feel like I'm going to lose the potential that we had in a relationship, and I felt like her acting that way actually X'd that out, and now I was afraid of losing it because I was kind of invested. You can be super specific about why you're feeling attacked, and then you can be specific about why your reaction would mitigate those circumstances. Like, if I'm afraid of getting abandoned and somebody ignores me, should I be mean, rude, nasty, angry, blaming, in order to get them to find that it's important to pay attention to me? No, because most of those things are going to make them want to avoid me more in the future. That actually doesn't accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish, which is to not be abandoned, right? So, going through this little thought experiment, you're like, okay, why did I feel defensive? Why did I react the way I reacted? Is that reaction appropriate for actually getting the goal accomplished that I want to accomplish? And very often we'll get to be, "Oh, I'm afraid of being abandoned, but I shouldn't feel that way," and then we'll judge ourselves, and then we get to go in this little circle and never find any solutions. Fuck that. Find a solution. If you don't want to be left, then you can be okay with the fact that you didn't want to get left, and that was the feeling, that you can honor that in the moment. Be like, "Look, I would like you to pay attention to me, because I'm afraid that if you stop paying attention to me, then you won't pay attention to me in the future." And that might seem unfounded and weird, but it's kind of like what I carry from childhood. And they'll be like, "Oh, yeah, no, I wasn't planning on leaving you. I was just pissed." And I was like, "Okay, well, maybe in the future we can find a solution where you can be pissed and you can state what you're feeling, but also maybe reassure me that later on we can talk about it and resolve some shit. And that's a much more effective way to handle fear of abandonment than getting all crazy and becoming what's the word, aggressive, right? And because then they're just going to want to avoid that in the future, and it'll actually exacerbate the abandonment problem, right? So, yeah, to get over being defensive in a relationship or in a conversation, you just figure out why you feel attacked and get really specific about it, and then focus on what the other person's intention might be. Because most of the time, they're not trying to hurt you. They're not saying, "Oh, he's susceptible to this, so I'm going to poke him right there." Like they don't do that. They're just doing whatever they do in their own scripts and patterns and traumatic responses and whatever. And if they've been to therapy or whatever, then they might get a little high and mighty over the top and try to look at it from a 30,000 foot view. It rarely has anything to do with the fact or the assumption that they're trying to hurt your feelings. They may hurt your feelings and not care in the wake of doing what they normally do, but it's not like they're not plotting ways to destroy you most of the time. And sometimes they are, and then you deal with that. It's appropriate to respond by doing things like cutting them out of your life and shit. Because it solves the problem. Anyway, so that's the first thing. It's to overcoming defensiveness. Figure out why you feel attacked. Be specific. Figure out what intention they probably meant. You can ask them directly, like, what do you mean by that? Because the way I see it, like it like hurt my feelings because it reminds me of, like, it makes me think that you don't care, and then you're willing to throw me away, and I'm afraid of that actually because I don't want to lose you. So what did you mean by that? And so that will foster maybe a conversation or maybe a shutdown, but a point where you guys can understand where your feelings are coming from rather than turning it around and be like, don't ever fucking talk to me like that, man. You fucking, yeah. I used to do that all the time, dude. It was so ridiculous. Anyway, second thing, overcoming common communication challenges with self-awareness, dealing with misunderstandings. Very similar thing. Assume. The problem is when you misunderstand something and you blow things out of proportion in a conversation, is that you're assuming what the other person means without clarifying what they mean. So one of the best strategies for dealing, like when you feel it, like what the fuck? Why would you say something like that? When you feel that feeling, you're like, I don't understand. What do you mean exactly? And usually when they're angry or they're trying to get something to stop or whatever, like I have my partner, she's like, she gets overwhelmed real easy. So if she feels like there's too much conflict, she just like shuts down. She doesn't want to deal with anything. And she's like, I can't have this conversation right now. And I used to be like, what do you mean you can't have this conversation? You want to fix shit? You just want to let things fester and die? You want me to feel like this for like 2 fucking days while you deal with your bullshit? And then right, get it all crazy. And I assume she meant, I don't want to hear what you have to say. What you have to say is not valuable to me. In fact, you can just live in my little world until you don't want to live there anymore, and then feel free to fucking exit stage left. That's what I heard. That's not what she meant. That's not what her intention was. Her intention was, I feel really overwhelmed. I don't know how to deal with conflict. I don't have healthy communication strategies like burned into my brain. So I need to collect my own thoughts and feel safe before I can even trust anybody else with what I'm feeling. That's what she meant. She can't say that, or she couldn't say that before we had multiple conversations about it. But that's what she meant. That was her intention, right? And I misunderstood it to mean that my opinion wasn't valid and she was willing to throw me out with the bathwater. That misunderstanding could very much create a massive rift of trust and rapport and bullshit in the relationship and set it doomed to failure. It also, if we try to clarify it, even if the clarification doesn't come out perfect, we know that there's room for care. right? Like, if I'm like, what do you mean by that? Because I took it like really hard. I feel like you don't care about where our relationship goes because you're not willing to work and communicate with stuff. And she'll say something like, well, I don't really want to communicate with stuff because I'm fucking overwhelmed right now, and you are causing most of my mental issues at the moment. And that is much more clear for what her intention was than my projection from childhood and from my traumatic response. So, dealing with misunderstandings, you go for clarity. And you ask, like, what did you mean by that? Because I took it like this. When you say things like this, I generally feel like this. When you stop talking in the middle of a conversation where I'm trying to get us to get on the same page, I feel like we'll never get on the same page, and I'm afraid of losing you. So uh, I feel like very, very vulnerable when you do that. And uh, what did you mean by that? Do you mean that we're never going to deal with this? Or do you mean that we can deal with it in the future? Or are there some rules that you need to make you feel safe about that? Like, we need to figure that out. And then if you do that in the moment, they're going to be like, yeah, I'm still overwhelmed. I still don't want to talk about it. But it opens that door, and then later on you can come when everything's kind of calmed down and be like, all right, so we brought this up. I didn't feel like we resolved it. I wanted to get some clarity on that because I don't want to feel like that again if it's false. Like, if you mean to try to destroy me every time you get overwhelmed, that's a different conversation. But I don't think that's the case. So help me understand, right? So that deals with the misunderstandings is clarity, and that seems kind of fucking obvious, but that's the strategy. If you forget about that in the moment, then you start doing things that erode the trust and the rapport you have in the relationship, and then the relationship dies, and then you gotta go find a new one. If you don't fix that thing, the new one's gonna act just like the old one. So, number 3. So the common communication challenges: defensiveness, misunderstandings, and then the third one is emotional overwhelm. When you get overwhelmed, uh, I talk a lot from the dealing with a dismissive avoidant because that's my current partnership, and so I got a lot of thoughts and examples about it because I study it super deep. But if you're the one who's getting overwhelmed and you need to avoid and shut down and stonewall and all that other stuff in order to feel safe again, then uh, one of the best ways to deal with it is to know that you get shut down when it comes to conflict and know what your triggers are in that conflict. Just like we were talking about yesterday and a couple of days ago when we were talking about emotional triggers and increasing your emotional intelligence and dealing with where your triggers came from childhood and all that stuff. If you know that you get triggered when conflict starts and you don't want to deal with the conflict, but you do understand that you love that person and you want to maybe resolve this stuff into the future, then instead of lashing out, shutting down, stonewalling, crossing off, you can just be like, look, I need a break because there's too much going on here emotionally for me right now to actually solve anything. I can't be on the same page with you because I'm super mad at you. And I'm not going to be mad at you forever, but I need a break. And I hope that you'll respect that, please. And then they'll be like, okay, but we still need to talk about this. Okay, cool. Not right now. Let's revisit this in 3 days after everything kind of goes back to normal and we can think with a clear head. Because I can't think with a clear head right now. You might be able to. You might need to fucking stand here and talk this out until you're done with it, but I can't do that right now. So we will do that in a way that works for both of us. But right now is not the time. I need to take a break. And you can be assertive with that and be clear because that clarity will also allow them to understand that you care, that you're not just abandoning every single shred of your relationship because you don't want to hear them at the moment, but also that you're going to be pretty firm about not talking it out right now when you can't fucking think straight. Because a lot of times, especially from the anxious attached side, I used to be like, because I'm a really good manipulator. Like, I had learned all this stuff, right? And I used those tools before I was securely attached. Like, I from my anxious side would just fucking lash out and fucking hash things out until you fucking submitted. And like, a lot of anxious attached people think, oh, I'm really weak, I'm the victim, right? But like, you're just as fucking savvy of a manipulator as anybody else. Like both ends of the spectrum have it. Just because this one wants a whole lot of control and autonomy, and this one wants to make sure that everything's good in the environment around them, doesn't mean they're not fucking manipulators, right? So when somebody who's overwhelmed emotionally sets their boundaries and then sticks to them, it's just as healthy as setting your boundaries. Like, look, we need to deal with a relationship in a way that puts us both on the same page. Otherwise, this isn't going to work, and I want it to work. Right? And from both sides, you can still set boundaries and be strong in them. But very often, you're still going to have to do a lot of things that you're uncomfortable with. But you don't have to do them right now when everything's fucking up in the air. Like, not everything needs to fucking be a do or die fucking ultimatum moment. You can be like, look, I'm gonna hit pause. I need a break. I'll come back. We'll do this in 3 days. Like, sometimes when I'm dealing with my partner, I'll be like, look, I'm gonna come back in a week and ask you this question again. Please, in your free time, think about how we can be on the same page of this together. And I'll give you time and safety to work this out on your own. It's got to be your idea, but I don't want to feel this way again, and I don't want to feel this way about you and resent you because we're not getting this resolved. And so I'm going to continue to ask until we can resolve it. And sometimes I'll wait a whole week and do it again. And she's like, I'm not ready yet. Okay, cool. Wait another week. That's okay, as long as she knows that I'm going to continue to try to be on the same page and try to resolve the things so that our future is much better than our current status and better than our past. So dealing with emotional overwhelm, if you are feeling overwhelmed, feel free, instead of lashing out and stonewalling and accusing and blaming and doing all sorts of shit just to get the thing to stop. Feel free to just be like, look, I can't think straight right now. I'm emotionally overwhelmed. I need to take a break. I'm not using this to fucking never deal with this, but I'm not dealing with it right now. And that will help you assert yourself in that way so that you can sort your own feelings out for yourself. Because very often, you're the one who has to do it. Like, you can't just take somebody else's cue. Like, we're adults. Like, we do what we want in our time frame, right? And so as long as you can communicate that time frame to somebody else, that like, I do care about you, but I can't deal with this right now. I would like to deal with this later. Please shut the fuck up, right? It's much more effective than using your strategies just to end the conversation by escalating too far or hurting their feelings or completely shutting down and ignoring. All that stuff is less effective than the strategy of clearly stating what you need in the moment. And those are the tools. Oh yeah, there's a whole big long list of things I was going to talk about, and I don't want to talk about any of this shit because it's all like, yeah, active listening. Like, we got a whole thing on active listening later. We beat managing your triggers to death, and we beat use some I statements. Yeah. Okay. There's another YouTube channel for that. Search for your I statements on the other channel. Oh yeah, and read Nonviolent Communication. Yeah, it's actually a really fucking good book. Anyway, that's the 3 strategies or the 3 common communication challenges to deal with and how to be more self-aware to deal with them, and a couple of strategies to deal with them in real time that shows your partner or whoever you're arguing with that you give a shit and you're going to be on the same page at some point. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please put them in the comments below. If you want to talk, if you want to listen to tomorrow's things, which is what? Yes, intentionality in dating. Yes. Okay, so tomorrow's on intentionality in dating based on self-awareness. And if you want to see that shit, feel free to subscribe. Click the little bell button so the notifications come when I release this thing, which will be 24 hours from now. I will see you guys tomorrow. And until then, stay awesome.